Good morning, everyone. I'm Debbie Tuck, and I would like to welcome you to our 50/50 Women on Boards San Francisco Bay Area conversation on board diversity. We are delighted to have you in this conversation to discuss how we can lead the way to diverse and gender balanced boards. I'm grateful to be hosting this event with my co chair, Mercedes Soria. 50/50 Women on Boards is an education and advocacy campaign committed to achieving gender balance on corporate boards. This year, we celebrate great progress, and we're very excited to welcome hundreds of women and men joining us today. Our San Francisco Bay Area conversation is one of 30 occurring across the country as well as around the world. It's such a special honor to have this important conversation with all of you, San Francisco Bay Area's most influential network of CEOs, senior executives, corporate directors, and community leaders. So, Mercedes, the day is finally here after months of planning, networking, and lots more Zoom calls. How are you feeling about the conversations we've been hearing for the past week? And how excited are you to hear from our VIP panelists and director coaches today?
Thank you, Debbie. Hello, everyone. The conversations have been nothing but insightful. There's something new to learn about every conversation. We have Seattle, we have Chicago. The conversations are continuous and they will continue until the 19th of November. I am very excited about the program that we have today for our attendees. This is a massive undertaking and would not be possible without some very special sponsors. Some of our global sponsors are companies such as Ernst & Young, Citizens, Kaiser Permanente, Bank of America, McKinsey & Company, Twitter, and so many more. But we also have worked closely with local companies, and those who have sponsored this event are Wells Fargo, Comerica Bank, and Well. This event also doesn't happen without our amazing team from the San Francisco Bay Area Leadership Committee. You know who you are, and we thank you so much for your efforts. While I explain how the day is going to go, we'd like to engage you in the chat room and find out where you're joining us from today. Feel free to go ahead and post in the chat. The day will be made up of three components. Number one is the key research that we're going to present to you that 50/50 Women on Boards does every year. Number two will be the VIP panel. We have wonderful names for you today, like Martin Kopelnicki, Teresa Bryce Basemore, Alphonse Upshaw, and Anne Raimondi. And lastly, the third part of this program will be the breakout sessions with our director coaches. We'd like to thank them for their time as they're going to spend the second half of this event to have a conversation with you about what would be your next steps to continue your journey to the boardroom. And with that, I would love to introduce the woman who does it all. I'm delighted to introduce you to Betsy Bergmer-Creder, the CEO of 50/50 Women on Boards, the co-owner of Retired Executive Search Bergmer Clayton, and the author of not one, but two books in how to get to the boardroom. Those are titled The Board Game and Winning the Board Game. So very welcome, Betsy.
Good morning, Mercedes and Debbie. Congratulations to you. Thanks for doing all this fantastic work in order to co-chair and lead the San Francisco Bay Area event. As you mentioned, one of 30 events throughout the country and the globe. We have Toronto this year and Athens, Greece is brand new events. And we have London and Madrid and Mexico City, plus our 25 U.S. cities. So we're on a roll, everybody, and welcome this morning to hear what's happening in the U.S. and in California. I wanted to add that among the 30 events, we have nearly 6,000 registrants. So you can imagine that the move to gain gender balance and more diversity on corporate boards is fast moving and can't be stopped. So you're all part of it. I would like to share with you now where we are with the statistics briefly in the nation and in California. So as you know, quarterly and annually, we use the data from our partner, our research partner, Equilar, to release our Gender Diversity Index. And we present the key findings, analyzing not only how many women are on every public company board in the Russell 3000, and that's 3 times as many as the Fortune 1000 companies. And we also report on the percentage of women who are selected for new boards, newly selected. And based on those who self-identify, we report on the race and ethnicity of all directors. So our Gender Diversity Index report is available online at our website, 5050wob.com. So let's move into where we are nationally. Pretty darn exciting. You'll see on the last bar comparing this year to last year, and these are statistics as of June 30th, end of second quarter, women have reached 25.6% of all board seats in the Russell 3000. This is higher than ever, everybody, higher than ever historically. It's a phenomenal achievement. Now, 25% is only halfway to 50%, of course, but we're certainly on the way. And you can see out of the almost 30,000 board seats, women hold almost 7,000. And that means men hold all the rest of the other seats. So we're just creeping up and bringing incredible business value to corporate boards. So, and also I want to talk to you about California, because in California, we are also way ahead, and we have really shot forward and upward. As you'll see on the last bar, we have reached 29.3% of the board seats of the Russell 3000 companies in California. 29.3% of those seats are held by women. And that's greatly due to the California law, SB 826, which requires that at least 3 women are on every public company board in the state by the end of this year. So you can see it's a significant jump over last year's 24.7, and it's 4 points higher than the national average. So we're very proud of that and looking forward to more progress here in California in the third quarter and the fourth quarter. Next slide. Nationwide, the company rankings. This is something we're really glad to see as well, that 7%, which doesn't maybe sound like a lot, but it's 7% of the companies in the Russell 3000 have already achieved gender balance. Gender balance in our definition is women holding 50% of the board seats, or on companies that have an odd number of board seats, like 9 or 13, as we count gender balance if women hold half, one more or one less than half. So the fact that 7% of the companies in the Russell 3000 have achieved that is remarkable in this beginning, and that's 215 companies out of the Russell 3000. So the second bar too is important in that the statistic in California of 3 or more women on boards this year is 34%, greatly due to the law, but it's compared to last year's at 26%. So we have really shot forward and shot upward, and we're pretty proud of that. So next slide, back to California. This is the number of companies that are gender balanced already in the state of California. And the top bar, you'll see this year we shot up to 10% of the 536 Russell 3000 companies here in California, shot up to 10%. So that's a huge jump over 6% last year. And look at the bar of the 3+ women on the California companies. 42% of California companies now have 3 or more women on their boards. And then the bottom bar, I love this. We're down for the 0 women on boards, down to a tiny 1% and shrinking. So of the Russell 3000 in California, there are no companies remaining with no women on their boards. Quite an achievement, everybody. So what do we need in California in order to achieve gender balance? We need a range between 817 and 1,400 women serving on boards. That's new or added board seats. The number to the left, which is lower, is where a woman would replace a man on the board, and the number 1,400 would be the number of women needed if boards add a woman to their board. And most, over the last 2-3 years, most California companies have actually added a seat to their boards in order to bring on 1 or 3 women, in not only to meet the requirements of the law, but all research shows that companies are more profitable and more productive when they have at least 3 women on their board. So no surprise. There's a lot of opportunity here, women. And we also at 50/50 Women on Boards promote and advocate for at least 20% of all board seats being held by women of color. Now, right now, only 12% of all directors nationwide are people of color. Men of color 7% of the board seats, and women hold 4%. So we have a long way to go, and we are focusing on diversity and increasing diversity on corporate boards, in addition to achieving gender balance over the very near future. And lastly, this slide shows the dramatic lack of women and men of color on corporate boards, broken down by the ethnic and racial backgrounds. And as you can see, most are lower than 1%. And we have a long way to go. So I wanted to share this with you. And we encourage people on boards and people who are not yet on boards to report their racial and ethnic background through their profiles and when they serve on boards with the SEC filings, because only when board members self-identify can we count the diversity and minorities on board. So we encourage you also to fill out your profile on our Equilars Board Edge program. You'll see that in the chat, and definitely it's a good way for you to indicate your interest in serving on corporate boards if you are not yet, and to be networked with others who are seeking corporate board members. So with that, I want to thank you for your for being here today and being part of this incredible movement across the country and across the globe. So back to Mercedes and Debbie. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy, for that overview and for leading the efforts in California for all the states to emulate. We couldn't have done it without you. We still have a long way to go for all California companies to be gender balanced, but it's encouraging to see the progress that's been made over the past year. That's why these conversations are so important. With that said, Mercedes, why don't you take us to the next part of the program?
Thank you, Debbie. Yes, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this VIP event. Eva Sage-Gavin is the Senior Manager Director at Accenture's talent organization practice and has over 30 years of experience in C-suite roles in Fortune 500 technology and consumer companies. Eva has served on multiple private and public technology boards, and she is the former co-chair of Women Corporate Directors in San Francisco and Silicon Valley chapter. Eva was recognized by the NACD as a top 100 board governance professional and was recently named to the Advisory Council of Stanford University's Michelle Kleinman Institute of Gender Research. So congratulations. And she also is Santa Clara University's Corporate Board Ready Advisory Council, which focuses on developing diverse board directors. So welcome, Eva. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Mercedes, Debbie, Betsy, I cannot thank you enough for that warm welcome. And I'm very excited to introduce our panelists today. Hello, San Francisco, and everyone joining us. So first, I'd like you to meet Marty Krapelnicki. Marty's the president and CEO of California Water Service Group and has over 30 years of experience in finance and in operations. But Marty, I love your note about over 24 years as a publicly traded C-suite executive. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Eva. It's an honor to be here to talk about this important topic.
In addition to Marty, Teresa Bryce Bazemore is a senior executive with over 30 years experience. And Teresa is currently the president and the CEO of the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco. Teresa is a board member of First Industrial Realty Trust and T. Rowe Price Funds. Teresa, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Eva. It's great to be here. And this is such an important topic that I'm glad to be here.
Welcome. I'd also like to welcome Alphonse Upshaw. Alphonse is the SVP and Corporate Controller and Chief Accounting Officer at Kaiser Permanente. Alphonse, I understand you've been there for 10 years and that you also serve as a board member and the audit committee chair for Shutterstock. Prior to joining Kaiser Permanente, you were an audit partner with Deloitte. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a real privilege.
And I'd also like to welcome Anne Ramundi. Anne recently joined Asana as the Chief Operating Officer and the Head of Business, having first served on the Asana board for 2 years. Anne also serves on the boards of Gusto and Patreon. Anne, welcome.
Great to see everybody.
Nice to see you, Anne. Well, I think I'll start with you first for our first panel question, Anne. So this concept that boards are built through relationships and that one or more board members will often recommend someone to be considered for their board. What are you seeing and what do you recommend for those that might be listening in today to encourage more and more board member engagement so that we can continue to see the incredible progress that Betsy shared with us earlier? So Anne, over to you.
Yeah, that's such a great question in terms of how boards are formed these days, and that relationship is critical. So, you know, my advice and some of my background in terms of how I was introduced to different board opportunities is the first, may sound really simple, but it's just to let the people who know you the best know that you're interested, right? And people that you might have worked with, admired, whether they're on the investing side, whether they're already serving on boards, former bosses, mentors, is just have that conversation of you're interested, you're ready, what kinds of companies are you interested in, and then get their advice and feedback on skills that you may need to build or introductions that they can make on your behalf. I think the other thing that sometimes people who are new to boards may or may not realize is just the people at exec search firms who are dedicated to board practices. So getting introductions to those partners, understanding what they're seeing in the landscape, and getting honest feedback on your background, skills, and readiness is incredibly helpful. And so I do think just being very focused on, you know, what kinds of opportunities are you interested in, and getting that message out is a big important first step. I'll just share a story. You know, my first public company board, SendGrid, which was then acquired by Twilio, very much came through introductions, people that I had worked with in the past, and SendGrid was a newly public company, and they were in the process of adding to their committees. And so the fact that I had on the inside of a public company been the person working really closely with the compensation committee, that very specific skill set was part of the introduction to SendGrid. So I think it's, you know, reach out, make the most of the people that already know you and are fans of yours, and then be really specific and thoughtful of like how you can add value on a board.
And that's such a great point you're making about networking and being very intentional. I get to mentor a lot of board director candidates, and they say, wow, this is like a full-time focus. And as you said, you know, that thoughtfulness and really putting a strategic plan in place and networking really is very powerful. Marty, I'm coming over to you on a point that Anne raised, which is this idea that as a CEO and as a perhaps non-governance chair, we're often looking for board directors who bring special value or unique skills. So, you know, what are you seeing in your industry, and any advice for those who are listening with us today about how do you highlight your value so that in addition to your network, people can see that unique expertise that our candidates might be bringing?
Sure. Thank you, Eva. First of all, I just want to point out that there is two strategic paths here. If you're looking for a pre-IPO company, there's a certain way to network. And then if you're looking at public companies, it's probably a little bit different. So I'm going to focus kind of on the public company side. Public companies really look for people who are acclaimed in what they do, who have high moral and ethical integrity, who are conflict free, who can really kind of dedicate themselves to the organization. You know, everyone kind of looks at director fees and thinks that's an easy check. I will tell you, the country club boards are long gone. There are very specific fiduciary roles that directors play. And so we look for people who can play those roles and really help the company out. And as a CEO, when I'm evaluating someone to potentially be on our board, it's, wow, can this person be a mentor to me? Can they be my sounding board? You know, what skills can they bring to the table? So for Cal Water, we led all our board members and we look at skill sets in kind of in verticals. And then we say, okay, if someone's going to be retiring, do we want to replace that skill set? So we try to keep a very balanced perspective of people on the board, but certainly everyone on our board are industries within their leader, very in their industry, very well known for what they do. But it all starts with that moral and ethical character. And then can they fit into the environment that we have? Because the team dynamic of the board is absolutely important.
Marty, thank you for sharing that and also pointing out the difference in terms of public, private, pre-IPO, and that might come up a little bit more in our dialogue. I know Ann has a lot of experience in that world as well. I'm going to go over to Alphonse. You know, one of the ideas that's come up is this idea of board diversity brings value. And we've seen all the great ESG measures. We've seen the World Economic Forum talking about measures of people, planet, profitability, and you know, really looking at board scorecards. So Alphonse, you know, you sit on boards, you're in an active role, you've got deep audit expertise. What are you seeing about diverse boards and what do you think the business value is?
Yeah, thank you for that question. You know, the ESG space is really out there and prominent right now, and it's also still evolving. One of the things that I think is great about ESG is that it is a vehicle to have the conversation about what does your company stand for? What are you trying to accomplish in terms of attracting and retaining and developing your talent? And I think it's an opportunity for companies to sort of tell their story, to go on offense and tell their story. And so in my boards, that is certainly part of what I do is to talk about those issues and bring them to the forefront, especially right now with what's going on with the labor markets and you know, things are shifting around quite a bit with people working remotely. We hear about the people leaving the workforce a little bit. And so it's just such an important thing. And it is, I think, a tool for companies to take advantage of.
Alphonse, you're making such a great point. I wait for the jobs report with great anticipation. And, you know, our latest report shows hopeful signs. But if you read the fine print, there are 3 million less people in the workforce today, at least the US workforce, than there were before the pandemic. And today's market coverage was all about supply chains and the immediate and direct impact on American families. And, you know, for those of us in global businesses, we're seeing this effect all over the world. So, you know, one of the ideas on board leadership is looking at these strategic issues and opportunities, because while there are 10.5 million open roles here in the US, there's also individuals who don't always have access to full opportunity. And Teresa, I know that you're so well respected in the community, and I'd love to ask you this next question from a board director and a CEO perspective. What are you seeing? And I understand you're leading as best practices in your industry that open a pathway for diverse individuals to either join boards or to join companies that would give that increased opportunity.
So certainly being in financial services, this has been a journey, right, to get to more diversity in our industry. And one of the areas that I focus on as a CEO is really about talent management. right? Making sure that we're providing opportunities, and also that we're looking at the potential that everyone has, in addition to recruiting people of all backgrounds into the organization. So I think that's a huge, important piece. And, as we're talking about the difference in how work will be done in the future, one of the concerns I have, and that we've been very focused on, is making sure our managers think about how they include both the folks that are in the room and those that are on the screen, because I'm concerned about whether we'll see a difference there. I think in terms of board diversity, one of the things that I think I've been in the middle of a couple of searches recently, and it has been a focus to work more and more, I think, with search firms. And one of the reasons is because, many of us got on boards because of people that we knew through various opportunities, networking that we've done over time. But I think that one of the things that we've realized is that to make sure that we're finding the broadest group of diverse candidates, that working with a search firm has been very helpful in that regard, and more companies are starting to adopt that. And the number of candidates that we're seeing and the diversity in those candidates has increased, and it is, I think, been very good for us.
Teresa, thanks for sharing that. Just yesterday, I participated in the debrief on the Spencer Stuart analysis that's been in place for many years, and it was a really vibrant discussion on this exact point. So I appreciate you bringing that forward. I'm going to go back to you, Anne. I want to pick up on something that Alphonse was talking about ESG measures and boards, and explore it a little bit further, because everywhere we turn, we hear everyone talking about that. And this idea of what are the governance practices that you're seeing or that you're actually leading that are elevating the conversation, that are opening doors for board consideration?
Yeah, I thought Alphonse did a great job sharing how important it is. And I would also maybe tie it to audience members who are thinking about companies and boards and values alignment. I think Marty made a great point, which is public companies are really looking for that, ethical, moral member who's going to come, be a great team member, but also is really, looking out for the broader interests of all stakeholders, right? That's part of the key of ESG, is really understanding their shareholders and then broader stakeholders and the impact of businesses on communities, on customers, on, social impact. So I think, that should be part of people's search process as well, is go dig in and see what are the published governance policies that the company is abiding by. How much thought have they put into that? What metrics do they measure? That's something that at Asana we spend a lot of time on, and have recently published our ESG metrics, how we're tracking them, what's important. And so many of the companies that are embracing and at the forefront of ESG are doing that very publicly. So I think that's a big first step, is that transparency on what matters and how to, and that's it surfaces how decisions are made, both at the board level and for the company.
And thanks for that. And you're all bringing up something so near and dear to my heart, which is this leadership role on talent management, with the appropriate balance between the difference between what management's responsible and board directors are governing. So I'm going to swing back to you, Marty, because you made such a great point, from the lens of a CEO, and kind of ask a hard question. And I really appreciate your help on this one. We know that many women, particularly women of color, and folks from underrepresented groups, sometimes find themselves stuck in middle management positions. And as you look at, having vibrant pipelines of executives, of future board directors, what are you seeing or what are you leading to open pathways so people can get to I think your phrase was prominent in the industry, and how do they rise and get that breakthrough to those C-suite or, the extended team roles? Any advice for us today?
Yeah, great question, Ann. First, well, starting off, I work for a 95-year-old water company, right? So let's start with probably what we looked like in the 70s to where we look like now, and the journey is very, very important there. And as I've bumped into what I call the old hardliners in management, and not so much on the board, but in management, I always make them read Milton Friedman's book, Freedom to Choose, because if you read that book, which is really about the consumer lens, and when you procure goods and services as a consumer, you want to go to the broadest base to get the best deal. And it's really the same thing from a recruiting perspective, right? You want to fill your candidate pool with the best qualified candidates, and then you want to pick the best person for the job, right? And so the broader you make that pool, the better. And so having that discussion with management, getting them subscribed to that way of thinking, getting some people off the ledge of, especially white males, it's like, oh my God, I'm being reverse discriminated against now. Well, no, you're really not. Our goal is to always find the best candidates or get the best products and services at the best price. So broaden that pool where we're fishing from, and then let the economics happen. And if you're broadening that pool, you're going to be pulling more candidates into the fold. So that's one way of doing it. The other way we do it at Cal Water, frankly, and especially in the management ranks, is I sit down and go through twice a year with the lead officer for each division, developmental plans for every management employee in the organization. And we have developed programs that we call FLOW, Future Leaders of Water. To get put into the FLOW program, you have to get approved by the management committee. And so again, we make sure that group of leaders that we're pulling up is a diverse group. And then we invest in them, encouraging people to go back to school, encouraging people to get certifications, encouraging people to talk to people like Alphonse, if he was our audit partner, and just go have a lunch and have a conversation of what you can do to be better, to be the best, and to build that resume and portfolio of skills up to where you really start to stand out in the organization. And competition is really a good thing. Sometimes you have to just help people just be more competitive. And those that become more competitive can really rise to the top.
Well, Marty, thank you. And since you called out Alphonse, I'm going to go over there to that handoff. Ann mentioned her focus on getting on board and any advice you would have for individuals, either from your own experience about ways that you broke through, or that public eminence, or tapping new networks that might put you in position to be selected for the board. So love any tips you can share since Marty gave us the handoff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are a number of strategies. One would be attending conferences and venues just like this one. That's part of what I did, is to try to get the ideas and suggestions and tips from people who had done it before. And then you start to identify how you can do that for yourself. I also spent time networking with lots of different groups. So the public accounting firms and the consulting firms, they are a great resource in terms of knowing people in the industry and the marketplace and who's moving around. There's different programs, the Santa Clara program that I think you are a participant of or helping to run, are great programs to get your name out there. The one thing I will say, probably the best advice that I've heard in my career around this is just excelling in your day job and taking your career as far as you can and really becoming an expert and having a value proposition. I think that is just the more you can do in your career will position you really for board service down the road. So that's what I've tried to focus on, is trying to bring that as far as I could.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the shout out. There's some phenomenal programs out there. And I think that people leaning in with their expertise to also lift the whole network, whether the Santa Clara University program for Black corporate board directors or women. We have a wonderful program with women on boards, women corporate directors. Back to, I think, Marty, your point about visibility, investment, and then, networking very intentionally, as Ann called out. I want to welcome Teresa back. I think we lost you for just a second, so I admire your technology, your backup system, so thank you. I'm not sure if you got to hear the whole conversation, but I'd love to ask for your leadership and advice as a CEO. Do you see an increased opportunity for companies to partner on this? You know, Marty was chatting about within the water industry, the FLOW program, which I was smiling about that branding, Marty, and that acronym. But Teresa, as you said, you're in a very different industry. And we've talked about the role of organizations like Women on Boards and universities and existing board directors who volunteer their time. But what can companies do to continue to open pathways?
So I think as each of us is looking for diverse, adding diversity to our boards, whether it's women or people of color, there are also opportunities to introduce other companies that are in our space to some of those candidates. I think that's an important piece of it. I just want to also add on the whole issue of getting involved in the industry. One of the things that I did early in my career was to get involved in the mortgage bankers industry. And, I served on the board of directors, on the residential board of governors, and I got to know people all over the country. And so that became a pathway as well for other job opportunities, but also for opportunities on boards. One of my early publicly traded boards was when the general counsel was looking for the first woman to add to the board and reached out to one of his former partners. And I was the name that was given. So, you just never know where those opportunities are going to come from. I speak to a number of women in the industry about the pathway to getting to boards and preparing themselves. And part of it certainly is what Alphonse talked about in terms of excelling in what you do, because, as there's been some discussion on this panel about, we're always looking for how we can enhance the knowledge on the board. And that helps the CEO. It helps the board be a better functioning board. So advancing in your career is important, but having those relationships and understanding how to advance your opportunities for board service is important. And we should be supporting people in that journey.
Teresa, thank you so much. And again, welcome back. I want to open it up a little bit for panelists to either add on or comment on some of the areas you heard from this esteemed group. And maybe, Anne, over to you. Marty opened the door and talked a bit and focused on public company, but I know from your wonderful background, you have experience many don't have in the pre-IPO private company space. Any perspective on those listening that might really want to be visible and a strategic way to approach public-private?
Yeah, I'd be happy to share. I think the really nice thing about late stage private companies, especially venture backed, right, which are very prominent across California, certainly in the Bay Area, is as companies prepare to become a public company, there is an actual natural transition of adding independent board members. And generally, they are looking to seat at a minimum, 3 new independent board members. So from a timing perspective, it creates a lot of great opportunity. Many companies that I work with are also really open to first-time board members. Part of it is there's a window of time for those board members to get to know the business. It's not yet on the public company cadence, right, of quarterly earnings and all of that. Like you have this lovely window to get to know the management team, the CEO, the other board directors who generally come from the investment side, but they're also eager at that point to see operators and operators that are going to dive in, certainly on the audit committee, on compensation committee, which I'll pause and just give a big promotion to compensation committees. Part of it, Alphonse mentioned the Great Resignation, right? The battle for talent. So many compensation committees now are not just compensation, they are DEI, they're talent. It's that holistic approach. And so many operators, that's what people do every day, right? Build teams, think about compensation, think about strategy around talent. And then, and then the company will stand up a nominating governance committee, which we talked a little bit about from the ESG perspective. But part of it is just understanding these committees need to be stood up. They're looking for people that are going to dig in and really, put in the time, as Marty said, of being aligned to the company's mission and values, and really that next leg of the growth journey for that late stage private company. So it's actually such a great time to, again, have a first time board role, because there's an openness to seating first time board members. And then there's a journey towards, becoming a public company board member, presumably because that private company, over the next period of time, it could be 2 years, it could be 3 years, is preparing to go public. So I'm a big proponent of that as a great learning experience and a great opportunity to add value, because for those CEOs and founders, they're also eager to have experienced operators, around the table and transitioning from a very investor focused board.
And thanks for that. You also pulled out a beautiful point. We are really fortunate in this part of the world. There's just an extraordinary number of opportunities, and the network that's connected that can give visibility is very powerful and connected. Again, since you tagged Alphonse, I'm going to go over, and this is Teresa, Marty, Alphonse, you all have extraordinary experience, whether it's the audit committee perspective, or, chair roles. So this is really for all three of you, but I was thinking of Alphonse's deep audit experience. Any additional words of wisdom? Because people do often, struggle with, should I try to do public first, maybe private? Should I start with private, then do public? I often get asked, should I try to do a large nonprofit and establish myself and then move from there? And so I just love the wisdom of the group, but maybe Alphonse, with your audit experience.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple thoughts. One is several years ago, when I was really starting to think about board service more actively, I was meeting with someone. It was a great connection that I had, and they asked me, why did I want to be on the board? And I just wasn't quite ready for the question. So I think thinking about why are you interested in this, and thinking about your message around your value proposition, which is aligned with, what we've been talking about this morning, all those things. What is it that you want to do? And so after I got that question and thought about it, the next time I got the question, it was just much better, because I was ready to go with it. In terms of strategies, I think that getting on a non-for-profit board is a great way to get introduced, especially if you haven't had a lot of board experience. Helps you with the board experience, but it can be a strategic way to start building relationships and making connections and helping you get ready. So I just think that that's a good way, a good entree for getting yourself ready for public company boards.
I would agree with that. I think that all nonprofits, though, aren't made the same, right? They're the smaller nonprofits where you're really rolling up your sleeves as part of the board. And then there is sort of the larger ones, maybe some of the performing arts centers or the museum boards, or the, large nonprofits where there is a professional staff. And so as a board member, you really are in a true governance role. And that's what you want to learn. You want to learn about what it means to be part of the governance structure and how to be a strong director. And to that point, it also, those boards also attract the types of people who are going to have the relationships to help introduce you to board service in other ways. So I think that's important. Vis-a-vis public versus private, the toughest thing is getting on that first board. That's whether it's private or public. So I'm not sure I would ever advise anyone to try to target one. I think you just do what you can to put yourself out there, let people know you're interested, work your network. And I don't know that it matters whether it's one or the other, as long as it's something that you have an interest in and you believe that you can add value to that company and their business.
Teresa, thank you so much for that. It made me want to do one rapid round in the few minutes we have left of words of wisdom. If we just step back and hear Betsy's extraordinary recap of progress. We also have each of your collective experience, and I did not calculate the total, but it's significant. So let's just do a rapid round. Marty, back to you. For those listening and thinking about board diversity and the mission and the challenges, what word of wisdom would you share with our group today?
I think there's probably three things. One, follow your heart. And I think, any board experience is a good experience. And you got to start someplace. And again, you want to build that resume up. It's kind of words of wisdom number one. Words of wisdom number two is what Alphonse just said. You spend your whole career kind of being this technical specialist and building this technical skills. And then you go to that interview to the boardroom and we're not going to ask you about your technical skills. We'll do a background check. We'll check references. We want to know about your leadership skills. We want to know about how do you think about broad problem solving. And so doing some research about the company, understanding the board dynamics. I looked in our proxy. We have 17 pages of how our board works. Read that before you go into the meeting and be ready to make that mental shift from being over here as a professional, a more technical person who's had this technical career, to what does it mean to be a leader and how do I fit into that board, and look at how that board works and be ready to answer those broader macro questions, because that's really what's going to win you that board seat. Your technical skills got you the interview, but it's going to be your leadership skills and your ability to creatively problem solve with a board that's going to get you the board seat, and be ready for that transition and have that discussion in the boardroom.
Marty, thank you. I expected every answer, but not follow your heart. That's so well said, because we often sit on boards longer than we were in companies, 7, 10 years, depends if there are term limits. And you really want to be passionate and make sure it's a good alignment. It's an important teammate group that you'll be on for a very long time. Anne, over to you. Words of wisdom.
Yeah, Eva, I think your comment was very aligned with what my words of wisdom were going to be, which is that you're going to be on this journey, with your fellow board members, with the management team for a good period of time. And so really thinking about, and some of those periods of times will have ups and downs, right? That judgment that Marty talked about, the shifting from being an operator to someone who is thinking about governance and good decision making, being around people that you really feel like you can build strong working relationships during both the great times and certainly during the tough times is an incredibly important filter to think about. So know yourself, know the kinds of people that you work really well with, and keep that filter as you have discussions. I think the other I'll say is just don't rule yourself out of industries. In particular, I'll speak about tech. More and more, the boards that I sit on, we would love to have people with non-tech backgrounds. Their tech is increasingly going into spaces that are regulated. And so there are many, much more mature industries that have dealt with regulation in a very sophisticated, thoughtful way. And that experience can add so much to tech. So don't rule out other industries just because that's not your main career industry. Like, think about pattern recognition and what you'll bring to a conversation. That's a huge part of diversity as well.
I love that point about know your value and unique perspective. And maybe if you look at the level of disruption that we've all been through, many boards and business executives are looking for a fresh new way to solve some of the challenges that we had never faced before. Really good counsel. Thank you, Anne. Teresa, words of wisdom, but before you say anything, so many people admire you to be a seated CEO, serve on multiple distinguished boards. How, at some point, I know I've been asked, how does she do it? So you don't need to comment on that. I just wanted to make sure you knew your fan club is huge.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think I probably work more than I should, but that's okay. I'm sort of a type A++ personality. But, I think there's such great points that have already been made by Marty and Anne. I would think about what you can bring to the board and how you can broaden the skill set that you have. So when I think about board service now, right, a lot of it is about what you can bring in terms of risk management. I mean, there are, when I think about boards, a lot of it is about understanding what the risks are, and the risks keep changing and they become broader. And think about the cyber risks that we're all dealing with today. When we went into the pandemic, none of us were expecting that we would have to deal with those types of risks. When I think about the financial sector having gone through the Great Recession, I said it was like dealing with what happened in 2 years in 2 months. And so I think thinking about how do you acquire those skills so you can be a real help in the boardroom, because as has been pointed out, those are the kinds of things that'll be helpful when you come to the boardroom. Maybe not as much of your expertise in terms of your technical expertise, although clearly we need that on the audit committee. And so, but I would just say, think about that and think about what you can bring, and helping develop those skills for yourself will help you not only in seeking out board service and being a good board director, but also in your career.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Alphonse, just speaking of risk, as you've highlighted, Teresa, who would have imagined on New Year's Eve of 2019 the role that health would play for all of us? And, back to, I don't know how you've done it, and thank you for the role that Kaiser Permanente has played in all of our lives. Words of wisdom. You have certainly been navigating the most extraordinary period in 100 years. What would you share for those seeking, increased board diversity and board governance and innovation?
In terms of, if it's okay, I wanted to comment on the earlier question around other approaches to this. And one thing I think that's really important is intentionality. So in my own experience, it went from I'd like to be on board someday to actually I want to get on a board, and I started getting very intentional about it and deliberate and thoughtful about my strategy, how I was going to network, how I was going to connect with people, and sort of curate ideas about how to get to the next level. On Shutterstock, as well as another board that I sit on, which is Black Directors Health Equity Agenda. Our mission is to increase board diversity on health system boards. And both of those opportunities came years after the first introduction with somebody that I said I had an interest. And so I was going through the process, trying to be intentional, but then the other message is be patient. And then they just came around years down the road. So being patient, not giving up, but also being intentional and strategic, I think are really important.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to the panel. This is so inspiring and uplifting. And I'll just add one personal comment. My board service on 3 technology companies was extraordinary. And back to the value of diverse boards, I had the opportunity with Betsy to tell the story about not only does your network deliver in terms of visibility and connectedness, but in one of my boards, I had a chance to host a diverse decision maker or client event that was extraordinary in terms of impacting the firm's aperture for new sources of revenue, and then had the opportunity to mentor, various employee resource groups to be able to go after new markets in a much more welcoming way with that knowledge of diversity. It was the most extraordinary experience. So back to the idea that, our consumers are diverse. We've seen the extraordinary welcome and progress, but there's more work to do. And that those who've taken the time this morning to listen, and now they're going into breakouts, will so benefit. We've learned public, we've learned private, we've talked about ESG, we've talked about the value of boards. We've seen role models from cross industry section who have found their path and now are turning their attention to opening doors for others. So thank you very much to the panel, Debbie, Mercedes, and Betsy, for inviting us to join. It's a privilege. And over to you to send us into breakouts so we can have even more intimate conversations. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Eva. We want to thank you and our wonderful VIP panelists for your wisdom, your experience, your expertise, and your valuable time. Can we give a great round of applause to our impressive moderator and VIP keynote panelists? Thank you, Teresa, Anne, Alphonse, Marty, and Eva. Such incredible dialogue and insights. I'm super excited about what we've heard today and that we have 31% of our audience that are early and mid-career professionals and over 60% in the later years of their career. The fact that they're starting now to learn about this, to understand how they can prepare, is something new and inspiring for me. So with that, we'd love for you to share in the chat with each other, what is the one takeaway from your discussion you just heard from our keynote VIP panelists? Did you have any aha moments? I know I sure did. There were so many things that were shared that were so helpful, such as transparency is what matters, excelling in your day job, just wonderful tidbits of information. While you guys are, putting your information in the chat and the things that you've learned, Mercedes, what do you have? Anything from your perspective to take away?
Got it. Because I was on mute. I'm sorry. Absolutely. Yes. To me, the most important points in this conversation were what everybody said over and over. What's your value proposition? What are you bringing to the table? Be able to show that and showcase that. And then also the second element is learning. If you want to be on a board, you need to learn what it's like to be on a board. And I would say here that 50/50 Women on Boards is an amazing place to start. They have workshops where you can learn about putting your bios, doing your resume, and things like that. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So what an amazing panel we had today. So much to learn from everyone. A quick tip from everyone attending today. You have a chat room, and if you can put your LinkedIn profile there, you can connect with each other. Still today, most of the board positions are being filled via networks. So make sure to increase your network today by connecting during this event.
Thanks, Mercedes. Yeah, what insightful information shared by our board. Very impressed by all of them. And I love the fact that, we had the panel that had public and private, board experience that could, play off of each other and help us understand the differences of both and what you needed to really do. With that, we know everyone wants to continue the conversation and get into the breakout rooms. But before we do that, I'd also like to thank our production staff for the incredible job they've been doing behind the scenes to make this a fabulous event. We really couldn't have done it without them, the numerous emails and calls and documents. Thank you so much. Mercedes, why don't you take it away and transition and help people transition into the breakout session. Thank you all for attending.
Of course. So for everyone, to access your breakout room, look over into the left side of your screen where it says agenda. On the agenda, you will see your breakout room. Click into the session and then click Join Now. This is how you will access your Zoom breakout room. If you have any issues accessing your breakout room, please go to the Help Center, which is located to the left of your screen, or simply email events@5050wob.com. This email is also located at the bottom of the description of this session. Thank you so much for joining today's discussion. And one last tidbit of information. If you're a woman in your mid to senior level career, looking to pursue a board position, 50/50 Women on Board has 2 courses remaining in December. The first one titled Path to the Boardroom that will take place in December 14th. And the second one will be titled Get on the Board workshop, which is December 6th of this year. Debbie will be posting the direct links in the chat room to both of these classes so you can continue to take your next steps. And finally, join us in 2022 for new educational programs, conversations, events, and networking opportunities. We look forward to continuing this conversation and hope to see you at one of our remaining city and state events. Thank you so much for attending today's session and enjoy your breakout room.
Thank you all. Bye.